Welcome in again, Sekou Smith from NBATV and NBA.com. Trying to give you a little bit of behind the curtain information from the members of the Southwestern Athletic Conference's Commissioners Advisory Board. Today we're talking with Adrian Bell, an attorney by trade, and certainly somebody who's been in the industry for quite some time. Joined Nike in 2011 and is currently serving as a vice president of corporate governance and securities and counsel. Is an assistant secretary of Nike Inc. and co-chair of Nike's Black Employees and Friends Network, which I think is huge for the purposes of the advisory board here. Adrian, good morning to you. Thank you for taking some time.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, man. And listen, before we dive into all your current responsibilities, could you give just a little bit of a synopsis of your journey, you know, where you started out and kind of fast track us to where you are in your current position?
Absolutely. So I think it starts out in the island of Jamaica, West Indies. I am the firstborn American son of my parents who emigrated here in the 60s, 70s in search of opportunity. So growing up in America as a child of immigrants provided a unique perspective as to kind of what it means to be in this country and the sacrifices that they've made to give me a platform. So I think it all starts there, like understanding how to not to waste the privilege of being here. So that's the beginning. Both of my parents at some point or another passed through an HBCU, with the majority of my mother's family going through Howard University. So the affinity and connection to the unique environment that being at a HBCU provides was something that appealed to me. So ended up going to Dartmouth for undergrad, which was looked on with disdain by a few folks in my family. And I was an economics major because I wanted to be active in the financial markets. So always intended on being on Wall Street and either being a trader or investment banker, something like that. Graduated in 2002. Shortly after the events of 9/11, all internship job offers were pulled and I had to figure out what I was going to do. So after undergrad, took a year off, worked at the Teach for America national office to help with diversity and inclusion efforts, and said, you know what, law school would be a good place for me to go hide out for a few years. So ended up going to the Howard University School of Law, where I was able to redeem myself in the eyes of a lot of my family, and did well there, and ended up working at mergers and acquisition shop, Wachtell Lipton in New York, where I practiced mergers and acquisition and corporate law for 5 years. The experience that I had there was phenomenal. I mean, hard work, sometimes debilitating hours, but preparing me and stretching me out for greater opportunities. And having grown up in the 80s and 90s, Michael Jordan and the Bulls, Pete Sampras playing tennis, Andre Agassi, Bo Jackson, name it. Nike was always something that appealed to me, and ended up applying for a job at Nike, not getting it, but sticking to it. Emailed one of the women who was on the panel saying, hey, really, really dismayed I didn't get this job, but you know, I'm still interested. And if there's ever something that comes up, please let me know. And ended up getting a call from her a couple weeks before I was to start another job. Interviewed basically for 5 months where I was at the other job, and then ended up moving to Nike, as you said, in 2011. And I've been there 9 years now, coming up in October.
Right. You've done so many different things at Nike. I'm wondering, at what point in your journey did you figure out that this law degree would allow you to dive up in all these different areas and all these different specialties that you could do in a large corporate structure like that?
Yeah. I think the interesting thing about law and the practice of law is that it's providing you a way to think, an analytical skill set, right? So you take a methodical approach to problems. So the process, largely how you go about thinking about it, is the same, even though the issue might be different. So I think that that type of analytical ability is something that has an ability to manifest itself in different ways and apply itself to different problems. So I think when folks see that you have a law degree, they then say, okay, well, this person probably will be able to turn over an issue a couple different ways, provide different considerations for others to make decisions on. So that, I think, is the key part of the law degree. Like, how do you go about finding information? How do you go about analyzing the information? How do you go about presenting a solution that is well thought out and reflects the various considerations?
Right. There, in so many different areas, and I think this applies across the board in whatever career path you choose, we're reminded of the importance of mentors and the importance of having somebody to help shepherd your career, and guide you, whether it's somebody that's and this happens in all parts of life. I mean, it could be a family friend. I can't tell you how many guys I know who are doctors or business people who had a family friend or a family member who helped guide them as a young person. Who did you have guiding you along this path? You mentioned your parents, in the background, but where do you find somebody that can help guide you to the path that you were on and to the place where you are now, if you don't come from a background where there's a bunch of people that do corporate law or a bunch of people that do whatever that might be?
Yeah. So it started in my house. So my parents were my role model, influence, superheroes, all of that. And I think then when you get out into the world and you are in college or you're in law school or you're at a firm or you're at Nike, you start to find people who their journey resonates with you, or there's something about them that there's an affinity or a connection. And it isn't always that they look like you or they come from where you come from or they're doing what you want to do, but there's some affinity that brings you towards them. And once you find that, it's all about nurturing that relationship, because you keep them close, you provide them updates, you make sure they know where you are, because you never know what that person knows and how they can help you in your journey. And at least from a corporate perspective, there have been many situations where I might have made a different decision, but I stopped in and I connected with one of those people who I had a relationship with, and they helped steer me in the right direction. So I think in terms of finding a mentor, the first step, or finding a sponsor, if we're going to talk about that, because mentorship and sponsorship are two different things.
Right.
It is being vulnerable and saying, hey, these are things that I know and don't know, and I'm looking for somebody to help guide me on my journey.
I wish you would explain too the difference between mentorship and sponsorship for some of the young folks who might not understand what the divide is when you talk about those two words.
Absolutely. So mentorship is someone who is there to guide you on your journey, someone to provide you feedback, tell you things that you may not have noticed, almost like the rear view mirror, right? Like to point out things for you to help you on your journey. A sponsor is the person who's in the room when they're making decisions that impact your career, if you're in school, your grades, whatever it is. So you need both. Sometimes they can be the same person, other times they're not. And historically, if we're getting there, your sponsor tended to be someone who's part of the power structure, whereas your mentor can be someone who may not be, or might be outside of that power structure. So that's where you start to think about, how do I make connections with people who don't necessarily look like me and who are part of the power structure? Because it's 2020, but this is still America. So, make sure that you're intentional about mentors and sponsors.
It's a great point. And obviously, young people are coming in contact with so many different people in that college environment or whatever educational environment they're in. And you bringing that up jogs my memory about the fact that I'm walking an HBCU campus, so I'm getting some opportunities and reaching out and interacting with people that look just like me. But my first foray into the business was in a completely different environment where nobody looked like me. And it was about proving myself every day to people who didn't inherently have my best interest on their mind. It wasn't their priority. How did you, from a confidence standpoint, navigate your initial stages into, corporate law in the professional ranks? Did you have somebody, something, or someone that you used as a springboard and a motivator, or was it internal? Was it something in you that said, "Hey, I'm trying to do certain things. I have a vision for what I want to do with my life and my career, and that's going to be the thing that I hold out in front of me as a carrot to motivate"?
Yeah, so I think it was a combination of both. So from as long as I can remember, my father would have me say 3 things before I went to bed. Love yourself, trust yourself, believe in yourself. Every night before I went to sleep, he would come in, say prayers, and then I'd say those 3 things out loud to myself, and my sister too, so that we would start to build this belief in self. You're worthy, you can do it. Almost that insulation that all Black people need against everything that is external to them, telling them that those things aren't true. So,
Right.
That was part of it. And then the other part of it, at least at the law firm, was I felt that as a Howard University grad going into this law firm where they pull from Yale, Harvard, Columbia, NYU, you name it, they're there. I had an obligation to represent on behalf of Hustle, the Howard University School of Law. We call it Hustle.
Right.
So I think that you have that. And then, of course, throughout the journey, there are folks who look like me and didn't look like me, who had an affinity towards me, or we created a relationship that helped me avoid some pitfalls along the way. But I think it was a combination of, having that belief in self and, those folks who reach down or across to help you on your journey.
Yeah, you mentioned some great points about family, and I think we oftentimes, from generation to generation, we haven't come from a lineage of certain type of professional. I ended up in a career field that neither one of my parents would have either had access to, knowledge, or vision of in the 1960s when they were going to college and matriculating into adulthood. The doors are wide open now. There are career opportunities that didn't exist when you were in college, when I was in college. Fearlessness is one of my key words that I try to use with young people about taking a risk, and believing in yourself, as you mentioned, your dad coming in at night saying those prayers. What do you tell a young person who doesn't have that kind of guidance, that kind of infrastructure supporting them, to hold on to? What do they grab onto when they don't have those sorts of supports in their life? Because that's something that I always wrestle with. How do you find that motivation and that support when you don't have it built in?
Yeah, it's hard. That is hard. And I will leverage a recent example that I think is pretty basic, and it could be something that's helpful. So we all were enthralled with The Last Dance. I mean, that was must-see TV, and the only thing that was on that was new and fresh, right?
Yes.
One of the things that resonated with me was when Mike lost, I think it was in '94, to the Orlando Magic. And he calls his trainer, and he says, we lost. And Tim Grover says, "Hey, man, let me know when you're ready to get back in the gym. And Mike says, I'll see you tomorrow. It's that mentality that, hey, every day isn't going to go the way we want it to go. But if we have the I will see you tomorrow mentality, that is how we break down barriers. That is how we do things that haven't been done before. That is how we regain our strength and triumph in trying times. So, you know, especially now and especially today, and especially given what we've seen over the last, you know, couple weeks come to a head, it's the don't be dismayed. Just get up and I'll see you tomorrow.
That's powerful. And I think it also speaks to this current environment. Students that are in school now and be coming out of college in the next couple of years are going to be dealing with a backdrop of economic, you know, contraction that is unprecedented, you know, for their generation in terms of the opportunities that it might have been lost, you know, with the coronavirus pandemic. We clearly have societal issues that will be affecting graduates and students and people who are diving into the work world in the next few years. If you got a chance to explain to them the tenets of how to handle themselves in that corporate structure, not even, it doesn't have anything to do with the law so much, it just has to do with being able to work in a corporate environment. What are the things, what are maybe 3 or 4 key components you would advise them on in terms of how to comport themselves in that environment on a daily basis to make sure they're advancing in and their career is on an upward trajectory?
I'd like to think that the things that I was taught when I was coming up are no longer applicable, but if we are being 100% honest, I think they are. And I think it's that you will be held to a higher standard. And as a result of that, you need to make sure that you are on your A game at all times, because there will be people looking for an opportunity to potentially disrail your success. I think that it is unfair, but that is the game that I learned to play. I think and I think this is applicable to everyone, we're all fighting a battle someone knows nothing about, right? So it's, how do you go into a situation with compassion and accept that, you know, what somebody might be presenting to you isn't about you. It could be about something that their dog could have died. They could have gotten an accident that morning. How do you make sure sometimes to turn the other cheek or give folks grace and not take it personal, because then that will send you down your own rabbit hole, diversion path. So kind of let things wash over you a little bit. And I think there's also something simple, is like work hard and be nice to people. It doesn't
simple but true.
You gain a lot of friends, allies, success by just working hard, giving your all, and trying to do it with a smile. So that's kind of, if I'm rattling off things, what I would suggest.
No, it's the advice I think we all could use at the formative stages of our careers. You know, when we're starting out, it's very rare that you get in a room with somebody that's doing maybe what you envision yourself doing, and being able to ask them exactly what they should be mindful of. I think that's important. People will see the brand and the name Nike and assume that every workday is filled with lunchtime hoops and everybody showing up in sneakers. But I don't know if they understand that it is a high stress, high energy corporate environment. It's a job that demands quite a bit from the people who do it at a high level, intellectually, emotionally, from an energy standpoint. All these years in the business, what is it that you do to stay the freshest and most agile Adrian Bell that you can be? Like, what is it that you've incorporated into your daily routine or your the way you operate that has allowed you to maintain that edge and to stay as sharp as you are?
Yeah, I think of wellness in the ways that you've spoken about is that I exercise or try to exercise, 4 or 5 times a week just to make sure that I'm moving my body and allowing myself to um, get things off my chest physically, right? So using exercise as a tool of processing. Um, I think the thing that I try and do, or this part of the game, or the offense, if you will, is making sure that I have smart people around me and not acting as though or pretending as though I know all the answers. Because it's one thing to draft an email you intend to send to the CEO and just send it. It's another thing to draft it, review it with some people on your team, review it with someone across one of your colleagues, to figure out if there's some angle that I'm not seeing or some piece that needs to be emphasized. So I think it's truly the concept of leaning into teamwork, and embracing the collective to provide for a better work product that has helped my career. Because I always feel like you don't get to where you get to by yourself. So you might as well take advantage of those who are willing to be in the foxhole with you, to push forward.
Interesting. Somebody told me something years ago when I was in college. It was a professional who was already in the business. And I asked him, I said, I'd like to do this, this, and this, but I'm not sure if I'm ready to move around the country or to chase my career ambitions all over the place. Now, granted, I went to college 1,000 miles away from home. So I was probably more ready for it than I realized. But that college environment is an artificial security blanket sometimes. You get comfortable in that realm. And then when you have to step out on that corporate level or that professional level, it becomes something a little more, there's not the security net that a college campus environment can be. Where did you find the confidence to know that you could go from, New York to Dartmouth and then across the country, to work important? I mean, just as a human being, where did you find that confidence to know you could go wherever to chase the dreams you had?
Yeah, it comes back down to, mentors, support networks, and family. Because I had a cousin who worked at Nike when I got here, so I was able to leverage his network, and he was also a mentor of mine. I mean, I remember he always had the cool sneakers, the fresh. He had the Jordans before they came out, and I said, I want to be like you when I grow up, because
Right.
but I had the opportunity to come out here, and I, would go eat Sunday dinner at his house, and just, the being able to use his experience and his network almost as a beachhead for me to then branch off of that, was important for me. But I think about opportunity, right? And the pursuit of opportunity is going to result in you being uncomfortable. And there's also the concept of you grow when you're uncomfortable. So if you find yourself getting a little too comfortable, you have to challenge yourself to think, am I growing? Am I continuing to add new tools to the toolkit? Am I pushing myself to be all that I can be? So I almost think, again, you lean into discomfort and you embrace those opportunities, and you have that "I'll see you tomorrow" mentality, and magical things can happen.
No doubt about it. The creativity and in the space that you work in, and as you mentioned, the analytical environment, which has become a huge component in the sports world,
Mhm.
all across sports, all across business, obviously, but more so in recent years in the sports. Would you advise, and I'm asking a semi-rhetorical question, but would you advise students to dive into the statistical space and analytics and making sure that they get a good foundation in that in college, even if they're not going into law or corporate, business, but just to have that background, because so many different areas of work now are valuing the analytics. And I say that thinking about general managers in professional sports and how we shifted for years from former players in every sport being the first name on a list that you'd want to run your organization, to now it's people with Ivy League educations who have analytics backgrounds who have become the golden boys. And I won't say boys and girls because men have traditionally dominated that, but the golden boys in that business.
Yeah, no, I believe, I think about preparing yourself for corporate America as one would prepare themselves for anything else, in that you put as many tools in your toolbox, as many arrows in your quiver, as many whatever as you can in that box that you're going into work with, so that you can flex and shift and apply different skill sets to any situation. I mean, I think computer literacy and understanding coding and all of that is another place where probably that's the next iteration of this, because tech has such an outsized impact on everything that we do these days. And it's even more amplified because we're having this conversation over Zoom. The analog way would probably be in the same place, me sitting across a room from you and us engaging that way. So it's like, how do you think about how society is shifting in the next wave so that we participate in? And I think that one of the things that was dismaying about the tech evolution or the tech revolution is that we were sitting on the sidelines because we weren't the ones in those rooms coming up with the Instagrams, the Facebooks, whatever it is. So it's about thinking a step ahead and saying, all right, where do I see this thing going? And how do we, as Black folk, make sure that we are part of that next wave of economic expansion?
I think you and other members of the board being involved, and having Charles reach out to everybody and put this group together is a part of that. I think that's one of the ways that you can impact that. And your work, like I said, so many different members of the board with all these different areas of expertise, I think is invaluable for students, because they're going to find out that you can have a passion and an interest in something, but if you don't know how to make that work for you as a career, as a long-term career, it's going to be difficult to figure it out. But if you got somebody like yourself who's done that already, you got a model. And I think role modeling is as powerful a thing as I've ever come across in my time as a professional. I'm always struck by how many people have someone in their background who's been that sponsor, that mentor, who's helped them get to that next level. So I appreciate you. And I know there's plenty of work to be done at Nike, but I think this is a great foundation for folks to get an opportunity to dive in on your expertise and what you have to offer. And I know you'll continue to do great things with the board.
Yeah, well, thank you for giving me the opportunity. I appreciate it.
All right, Adrian Bell, thank you, sir.